Black Panther Wakanda Forever is the 30th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now playing in theaters. Just like how the world tragically lost Chadwick Boseman a couple years ago, Wakanda Forever decides to focus on the nation of Wakanda mourning the loss of their king T'Challa. And addressing this right off the bat because I feel like it has to be addressed. After the passing of Chadwick Boseman, Marvel had a very tough decision: recast the character or retire the character permanently. And despite a large majority of fans' wishes, they decided to go with the route of retiring the character of T'Challa and laying him to rest along Chadwick Boseman. Now, while I was in the camp of recasting T'Challa and continuing his character on, I'm not going to complain about the decision that Marvel decided to make, because I don't envy them for having to make it at all. This clearly was a death that impacted and affected them very much. So I completely understand why to them it felt like replacing Chadwick Boseman, so to speak, so soon felt wrong. So all that being said, the way that Wakanda Forever handles the death of T'Challa I thought was done very well. The death of T'Challa is really what sets the events of this movie in motion. And the way that Ryan Coogler went about showing how not just these characters are mourning the death of their son, their brother, their king, but the entire nation of Wakanda is in a state of confusion, of shock, of worry, because they are now put in a position where they no longer have a protector to protect their nation. So when a new threat in Namor, played by Tenoch Huerta, shows up challenging Wakanda to a war, tensions rise along with emotions as the nation looks to a new leader to protect them. And going about the story in this way, this movie gives a lot of characters from the previous film a lot of time to shine. The cast in this movie was absolutely incredible. They all had a huge challenge stepping up to a plate that I don't think they ever imagined they would have to step up to. And the fact that they're all so clearly still emotionally raw from not only losing their friend, but the leader of this franchise, absolutely comes across in all of their performances. Angela Bassett, for example, I find that she was a little bit more in the background in the first film, honestly a little bit forgettable in the first film. That is not the case in this one. Here she is a powerhouse. As the Queen of Wakanda, she commands the screen with such ferocious presence. She brought something to this movie, to this character, that I was not expecting, and whenever she is on screen, it is impossible to take your eyes off of her. Another huge standout for me was Danai Gurira as Okoye. Not only did she steal every scene she was in with the deadpan humor that she brings to Okoye, but her character also goes through a pretty fascinating character crisis as she is the defender of the throne with no king to sit on it. And I found her performance tremendous. However, with all of these standouts, with all of these people that are going to be the talk of the movie coming out of it, you cannot overlook what Letitia Wright is doing as Shuri in this movie. Letitia Wright as Shuri has gone from this supporting character to being thrust into the lead position of this movie. Not only did Letitia Wright have a very tough task of being the lead of this movie, I mean, the whole story revolves around Shuri's emotional journey, but she also has to give Shuri this vulnerability that Shuri has never had before. And not only Shuri, but Letitia Wright as an actor has to be vulnerable herself, and she absolutely killed it with this movie. I thought she was phenomenal. Now, Dominique Thorne is introduced in this movie as Riri Williams, who's going to be Ironheart. She's getting her own Disney Plus series later down the line, and I thought she was fine in the movie. I can't go into too much spoilers, but she doesn't have overly much to do in this movie with what she's given. Her role in this movie doesn't really give her that much time or that much opportunity to win us over as an audience to the point that I want to see a full series of her, but I will say that where they lead off with the character, I'm curious to see where they go with her in the future. But Dominique Thorne is also a representation of some of the shortcomings of this movie, because this movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes. Yeah, that's a long movie. And there is a lot stuffed in this movie. This movie is filled to the brim with stuff, and sometimes it can feel a little bit overbloated. When this movie is focusing on the grief and loss and mourning that the nation of Wakanda is going through while also dealing with this new threat in Namor, I found it very enthralling and fascinating. However, this is the MCU, and the MCU constantly has to be expanding its universe, and when this movie is dealing with the setups and connections for the overall MCU going forward, while I enjoyed seeing that, I like seeing that in MCU movies, I will admit that you can feel the weight of that on this movie. It really bogs the weight of this movie down to the point that it bends. It doesn't break, but it gets pretty close. I did start to feel the runtime at around the 210, 215 mark. And there were a couple things that I was underwhelmed by that I can't get into because spoilers. But let's just say that some of the moments in this movie where I feel like they expected me to clap and cheer kind of came across to me as lackluster and unearned. But even with all that MCU setup and connections in there, I'm honestly shocked at how much it feels like Ryan Coogler had full creative control over this movie. I am fascinated to see what the conversation for this movie is going to be from the general audience, because for 95% of the movie, this did not feel like your typical Marvel action movie. I would go as far to say that this is not a Marvel movie for young kids, and I honestly think a lot of audiences are going to be surprised at how deep this movie gets with its themes, its messages, and its dramatic elements. There are long stretches of this movie with characters just talking to each other, grieving with each other, mourning with each other, telling each other what they've been through, what they're going through, and I honestly think some audiences are going to come out of this movie feeling like it was a little boring. I personally was completely wrapped up in it. I loved every second of it. But yeah, as an MCU movie goes, this is a little bit slower. It's nowhere near the slow burn that Eternals felt like for a lot of people, including myself. But it does have that kind of feel more than most of the Marvel movies do. Of course, I'm not saying there's no action in this movie. Of course, there's action in this movie, but it is few and far in between more than most Marvel movies are. When it arrives, though, it is a spectacle. I was blown away by the size, scale, and scope that Ryan Coogler was able to give this movie. It is so much bigger than its predecessor, and honestly, it's a lot bigger than a lot of other Marvel movies. It has a real epic feel to it. It extends across the globe, and I found it stunning. This movie is beautiful to look at. If you guys have been disappointed with the look of movies such as Thor: Love and Thunder, overly used by green screen, looking like it's in an animated film, that is not the case with Wakanda Forever. You're not going to find much of that at all. Autumn Durald was the cinematographer this time around, taking over from Rachel Morrison, who did the first film, and I gotta say, Autumn Durald did a phenomenal job. I think this is some of the best cinematography the MCU has ever had. I was honestly mesmerized from it. Everything from the landscapes to the underwater sequences, the way that she captured everything, almost every frame looks like a painting that I want to hang on my wall. Guys, going into Wakanda Forever, I admit I was nervous. This was such an uphill battle that I felt Ryan Coogler and the rest of the creative team had to tackle, losing their star, losing their main character, getting us to still love the Black Panther franchise without the Black Panther in it. And honestly, I gotta say, they tackled that uphill battle and they conquered it better than I think they ever could. And what Ryan Coogler and Marvel and the rest of the casting crew pulled off here truly blew me away. Phase 4 has been a little bit up and down for me, and this being the finale of Phase 4 really ended it on a high note. This movie was probably more personal to the cast and crew and Ryan Coogler himself more than we'll ever know, and it feels personal. The exploration of grief and loss that this movie puts its characters through, I found to just be so beautiful, while also honoring the memory of Chadwick Boseman. They were able to find a way to continue this franchise that not only felt like the right step forward for the MCU as a whole, but also feeling like a natural sequel to the first Black Panther. I can already tell that it's not going to be for everybody. I can already tell that this probably won't have as much of a rewatch factor as a lot of MCU movies do, but for me personally, watching this movie in the theater tonight, I loved it. And so for that reason, I'm going to give Black Panther Wakanda Forever a strong recommend, because I thought what they were able to pull off with this movie was just brilliant. Anyway, guys, those are my non-spoiler thoughts on Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I could go into a lot more detail, but I won't in this video. But what did you guys think of Wakanda Forever? Did you like it? Were you disappointed by it? Did it work for you or not? Comment down below. Let me know all your thoughts and opinions, guys. If you like this video, if you like movie reviews and movie talk, why don't you go on and click that subscribe button. Hit the like button. It helps this video out a lot as well. And I'll talk to you guys again real soon.